Welcome to Reaching Out. I'm Gregory Floyd, President Local 237 Teamsters. With us today is esteemed columnist Micah Powell from the New York Times. Michael, welcome to Reaching Out.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You report and write about New York City, and the title of your column is Gotham, a nickname for New York. How did you decide on your subjects? Before you go there, nickname, did you get that from Batman?
You know, I grew up with Batman. Of course I got it from Batman.
Okay.
I mean, no. I mean, it has a long, lineage in New York. But yeah, I grew up reading like Batman comics, and so yes, in part I got it from Batman. I always liked that, and it kind of had that resonance. I grew up in New York City, of kind of, of New York kind of stretching back through the years. So yeah.
I thought so. I mentioned that to our producer. He said, you would say that on the air. I said, I will.
And I will admit it on the air.
Yeah, so that's funny. It took me a while when I was growing up reading the comic books in Gotham City. I said, I wonder where Gotham City is, not knowing that I was in Gotham City.
That's right. You were there.
Yes, I was there. Many of your recent columns have focused on the mayoral election. We now know that public advocate Bill de Blasio will face former MTA chief Joe Liotta in November. How do you assess this race?
Well, first off, I mean, I think that you start, notwithstanding that there hasn't been a true Democratic mayor in 5 terms now, you start off saying that the Democrat has the advantage. What do I mean? Well, I mean, Bloomberg was sort of a special exception kind of twice over, right? I mean, it happened both in the echo of 9/11, the shadow of the 9/11 attacks, and of course he could dump 70, 80, 90 million dollars on the city to make that happen. That isn't going to happen with Mr. Liotta. So you assume, and the Democrats seem unusually determined this year to retake the mayoralty. So I think you look at it, my view would be that, Mr. de Blasio starts with a decided advantage. Isn't to say it's over at all. Liotta's a smart, savvy guy. He served in the Giuliani administration. He is not a caricature of some right-wing Republican. He knows how to work with unions. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that he could be a formidable candidate. But I do think that if you had to assign and say, well, that's the guy who's in the advantage going in, you'd have to say it's Bill de Blasio.
Now, I think there's one other candidate, at least one other candidate in the race, former Bronx Borough President Adolfo Carrion. And we don't hear his name mentioned at all. What do you think of his chances?
Kind of slim. I mean, look, he was a pretty popular Bronx Borough President. But, New York, I mean, the advantage of running on those major party lines, as you know, is enormous. And it isn't as though Carrion's going to come in again with kind of Bloomberg money, something that just turns the dial and says, all bets are off. So I would assume, again, assumption's always dangerous, but I would assume that he's got a Himalayan mountain climb ahead of him if he wants to be mayor.
Now, a few weeks ago, actually, Bill de Blasio was in 4th place in the poll that was taken just a few months ago. What does it tell us about his 40% win and the vote and what he was able to do and avoid a runoff?
Well, for one thing, I should tell your listeners, of course, it probably says you shouldn't listen to me because I thought a couple months ago that he might be dead in the water. So much for what I knew. I mean, it certainly did appear there was a long period there where he was kind of bobbing along between, say, 10 and 12%. It appeared that Chris Quinn, remember her, was, had a decided advantage. Then you had Weiner come in, and it looked more and more like Bill de Blasio was falling into the shadows. And of course, you had Bill Thompson, who was also a few points ahead consistently in the polls of Bill de Blasio. I do think that at this time in the city's history, a message, which is not new for Democrats, but a message of kind of two cities, and that, that is the vast majority of New Yorkers, middle class, working class, and poor, have this sense of kind of falling behind, of sliding down that mountain, really resonates. And again, I mean, it's not the first time. Freddie Ferrer used this theme in 2001 and 2005. But I think that, if you will, it seems like things have gotten to a crescendo now where that particular message really seemed to kind of resonate with voters, white, black, Latino, in a way that we haven't seen in past elections.
I could tell you about a year and a half out, people ask me, what do you think about the mayoral election? And I thought it would be between the two bills. And I always said that. One bill would be the mayor, Bill Thompson or Bill de Blasio. And I said that. The reason I said that is because Bill Thompson was going to come back, and he ran 4 years ago. And I knew Bill de Blasio was a master at politics. And what I thought was the fact that Christine Quinn gave the mayor a third term, and he was becoming increasingly unpopular over the last 2 years, that would be laid at somebody's doorstep. And I thought she was so connected to him that she would be the person that would be taking a dive once everyone else in the race started pointing to her. I didn't figure Anthony Weiner in that equation.
Right, that was sort of a wild
Yeah,
card.
He just came out of nowhere. He just came out of Twitter for that. So
and descended back into Twitter.
Into it. So that one I didn't figure. But I watched him come in, and people say, you got to take a look at Anthony Weiner. And I said, I'm not sure if we know everything about his resignation from the Congress. That there could be some more there. I want to take a chance. John Liu was running, and I said I knew what his problems were, and I want to take a chance on him. And then there was Christine Quinn, but I said you have the two bills, and that's what I did say.
Yeah. Well, you're the guy I'm going to go to the track with.
Well,
because you got it a lot. You got it on
two bills.
Yeah.
I would tell people it comes to the two bills, but what I didn't count on, and I didn't know. Of course, I knew his son, Dante de Blasio, but that commercial that he did, that's all I could hear going across the city. The commercial.
It was
the
extraordinary,
afro.
right?
It was extraordinary.
Yeah.
It was almost as if he was running. His son, Dante de Blasio, was running. I could tell you could give him a pair of drumsticks and he could be in a rock band at this point. And I'm not making fun of him. I'm just saying he is a popular young man.
Oh no, he better ask for a little increase in the allowance, I'd say. Because
I think he could do well on his own. He goes to school and he's got a great career in marketing or whatever else he wants to do.
Most key people. I'm sorry, but I was thinking when that happened, it must be the kind of thing that keeps a campaign consultant awake, in the middle of the night, right? I mean, who knows, right? Kind of what's going to take off. I mean, you'd run this ad; it was a very good ad, but it's just like, who would have in a way guessed that just that one ad, boom! It's like throwing a match into a gallon of kerosene. It just takes flame, and who knew?
The second I saw it, I said, "Oh, the ad." I get calls from all over the country.
Yeah,
they said that kid in that ad. Oh, that was great. It's a beautiful ad, master. Eliot Spitzer and Anthony Weiner and Vito Lopez all lost. Do you think that was a moral vote?
Well, that's an interesting question, right? I mean, right. It is interesting when you look down to the kind of Republican, Bible Belt down in South Carolina, for instance, or in New Orleans. They have no trouble re-electing guys who leave their wives, go to cat houses. I mean, all of this kind of stuff. And here we all of a sudden look like maybe we return to the Puritan roots or something of the Northeast. I do think that you have to kind of differentiate each one. I mean, I think Vito, just came off, frankly, it's kind of an old lech, right? I mean, and I think that's very hard for voters to accept at some point. At some point, he just kind of hit, the expiration date. With Spitzer, I kind of think that he, what that also shows is the power that we like to say the party's dead, but at some point, if you run against everyone, right? I mean, Stringer had every union endorsement. Yes. He had every political endorsement. He had environmental groups. He had, so, you know, he ran, Spitzer was like running into a fierce wind. And I'm not sure if I'm Spitzer, I think to myself, oh, voters have forever rejected me. I think it says, you know, you can't get in with, what was it, 4 or 5 days to go against an absolutely united front and a, you know, reasonably popular politician and think you're just going to bulldoze him. And who's the other one, Weiner? Well,
that's interesting. Yeah, Weiner. So, Weiner.
Yes, maybe that is an example of New Yorkers just saying enough already.
Well, that last interview he did on MSNBC where he said no one watches his show, so Donald, well, I can say my 15-year-old daughter watched that and with me, and we were watching that. And I've never seen an interview go that well. No, that bad. Did you see that interview?
Yes, I did.
I didn't. I never saw Anthony at a loss for words that way.
Yeah. No, I think that's kind of when his campaign officially just went off the tracks, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was almost as if Fonzie was riding and jumping a shark at that point.
Right.
And one more, Micah Kellner was running for a council seat, and he lost.
Yes, and that too. I mean, you have to assume, right? I mean, he's an incumbent. Well, yeah. I mean, he's a guy who's been in politics for a long time. So, right. I mean, maybe New Yorkers are less tolerant of that sort of thing than, you know, our national reputation says. I mean, as I say, it is ironic that guys in the Bible Belt, you know, deep Republican South can get away with, you know, behavior that's arguably even worse than this. And, you know, voters don't blink an eye, but maybe New Yorkers have a hidden Puritan streak in them.
Well, let's face it, the last 4 or 5 years, people have been laughing at us all over the nation about our politics and our political leaders.
That's right.
There was some embarrassing things done by both parties.
That's right.
Yeah. So I guess
that's right. So maybe just enough already.
Enough is enough. You're listening to Reaching Out. I'm Gregory Floyd, President Local 237 Teamsters. Our very special guest is Michael Powell. He is a columnist for the New York Times, and his column is Gotham, and we're talking politics. The failure of the City Council Speaker, Christine Quinn, in this election was thought by many to be a direct result of her association with Michael Bloomberg. I mentioned that earlier. What do you think? I mean, I'm talking about Michael Bloomberg and the third term.
Exactly. Look, I mean, clearly the third term, her agreement to push that through the council and put it up for a vote with, you know, not much time and completely reversing herself at kind of the mayor's beck and call was a disaster for her. I mean, it trailed behind her like, you know, a dog with, you know, cans, you know, tied to its leg or something. I mean, she just couldn't escape it. However, having said that, I also think she hurt herself. I've long kind of fixated on sick days, that here she was, and you could argue maybe unfairly that it's seen as, well, that's something that a woman particularly, you know, understands and deals with, though, I mean, in fact, as many people know, it does, to kind of stay home with a sick child and this sort of thing. And here was a proposal to give, you know, basically a bare handful of days off a year to full-time workers. And the sense was that she had to be kind of pulled kicking, not the sense was, the reality was she had to be pulled kicking and screaming to even allow that to come onto the floor. And of course, ultimately she endorsed it, but way too late. And I've long thought that if she had picked a couple of issues like that and said, okay, you may disagree with me on term limits, but here I'm going to do a couple, you know, basic kind of progressive things, that she may have been able to kind of change the dial. But the problem was, is she kept on issue after issue, she basically took the Bloomberg position. And I just think, you know, people said at some point, no, you know, stand up on your own legs or we're going to look elsewhere.
Unfortunately, this is all the time that we have for this edition of Reaching Out. A very special guest was Michael Powell, columnist for the New York Times. His column is Gotham. You can read it almost every day in the New York Times. Thank you, Michael, for coming on Reaching Out.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.